Hello, everybody. I am Terry Jenkins. I am the writer and creator of Favorable Athena, and I am the owner of Terry Jenkins LLC, a Christian-based comic and cartoon company. And this is officially going to start my writing comics guide. And I'm I've been writing comics technically for over 10 years. I took a break to focus on writing novels, and I wrote four, not published. They're all still being heavily edited. In fact, two of them belong to my Favor of Athena series. Back then it was Favor of Aries, but I decided to um, turn that back into a comic book because I felt like that was the better platform. And that made me go, man, I spent this whole year creating the first issue. I published 2 pages a month, so I can afford, but I'm still doing what I always wanted to do my whole life. And I figured why not share that knowledge? So right now I am recording this on Zoom, obviously, and I am going to share my Word document because my goal is to turn this into a book so that it can be shared with everybody. And I'm not understanding why it's not coming up. So for our first chapter, we're going to focus on character design. And when it comes to making a comic book, obviously, just like any other story, you need characters. In this case, we're going to focus primarily on our protagonist, and then we're going to work with our antagonist. And with that, we will figure out the theme and the conflict. All right, so let's start with our protagonist. The first thing the audience is going to want is to care about the protagonist. That means even even if you think about novels or TV shows, comic books are the same way. You only have that first initial couple of pages to hook your audience. There's 2 ways of doing so. You can hook them by making them care about the protagonist, or you can make them care about the story. Right now, we're going to focus on making them care about the protagonist because the protagonist is going to go and drive your story most of the time, especially you have a superhero kind of comic book. So, how do we get people to care about our protagonist? There are several ways, but we're going to look at 3 crucial factors. The first factor is making sure that the protagonist is not perfect. The protagonist should always have some kind of problem. One of the reasons why people don't like Superman as much as they like Batman is because Superman has all these powers and he only has two weaknesses, and those two weaknesses are not very commonplace. We know that Superman is weak to kryptonite, but kryptonite isn't readily available, at least not to my knowledge of current comic book lore. And changing the yellow sun to red also takes an extreme amount of effort. So you essentially have to kill Superman off. And with super speed and super strength, it's hard to do that, right? So that's one of the reasons why people don't care for Superman as much as they love Batman, because Batman has a whole bunch of problems. Batman saw his parents get killed, as opposed to Superman, who was sent to Earth without even knowing that he was an alien. When we look at manga, specifically Full Metal Alchemist, the Elric brothers, Edward and Alphonse, have nothing but problems. Their dad disappeared on them. Their mom got sick and died. They perform alchemy to bring her back, which is against the rules of alchemy. And Edward lost his arm and his leg. And Alphonse lost his whole body. And the whole plot is now trying to find the Philosopher's Stone to get their bodies back. Right there, that draws you into the story, especially once you learn what happened to them. You have to make the audience care about your you have to make the audience care about your protagonist by giving them problems. The second way to get the audience to care about characters, and again, in this case, the protagonist, is you have to give them a want. They have to have a goal. Again, using the Elric brothers from Full Metal Alchemist, the goal is to get the Philosopher's Stone. Why? So that they can get their bodies back. What is Batman's goal? He wants to prevent what happened to him to happening to somebody else. Spider-Man, his goal is basically the Thing. He believes that he needs to use his powers to help others. Having a want and goal for your characters gives the audience something to get behind. It allows us to cheer for that protagonist. It allows us to feel sadness when that character misses the goal. If a character doesn't have a goal, there is no story. Or at least it's going to be a flat story. Characters, the best characters, always have a goal, a want. And their problems can hinder them from accomplishing that particular goal or want. And yes, some problems may be external that come in the story through the plot. And the protagonist or our characters have to want the goal so bad that the way they handle the problems that are external or internal throughout the story is what drives us to those characters. Edward Elric was very aggressive in his goal to get the Philosopher's Stone. So much so that sometimes he almost, if you're going by the first series, he almost crosses the line of trying to make that succeed, especially to help Alphonse. However, his brother Alphonse has been a little more lenient and not as aggressive. He still wants the goal, but he's not willing to cross lines like Edward almost did. And that is brought about by their need, well, not their need, by their want of finding the Philosopher's Stone. And that's where the drama comes in. That's what makes Full Metal Alchemist, in my opinion, one of the greatest anime stories to be told. Very underrated. If you want people to care about your characters, they have to have a goal or a want. The third way to make characters be memorable is they have to change throughout the story. In other words, they need to learn a lesson or they need to realize that they're going about things in the wrong manner. Oh, let's remove that. Let me start. The wrong way. So this needs to be a life lesson, and this need is most likely related to the theme of your story. Let's look at the Elric brothers again. What did they need to learn before they were ultimately able to succeed in receiving the Philosopher's Stone? Throughout the first anime series and throughout the manga, they had to learn several lessons. Even when you look back in their past, they had to learn that they made a mistake trying to bring their mom back. Bruce Wayne had to learn to humanize himself over the years. Hold on 1 second. Now, one could argue. Now, one could argue that Batman maybe didn't learn anything, but he did. He had to learn martial arts. He had to train his mind um, to become stable enough, even though some people consider him unstable. He had to learn all that in order to become Batman. So at the end of the day, the character needs to change, and they change through the theme. Spider-Man is another good example. He changed from being selfish to being selfless. The Eric, the Erics throughout the series had to learn to forgive themselves, and in a roundabout way, they also had to learn to forgive their dad. It's a lesson that they did learn as soon as they lost their limbs, but they also had to learn life lessons along the way. They had plenty of fights throughout their journey of finding the Philosopher's Stone. So we always have to remember, if we want our characters to mean something to the audience, they have to have problems. They can't be perfect. They need to have a want or a goal. They also need to learn a life lesson. They need to change throughout the story. It could be as simple as going from being mad to being happy. Now, when we think about our protagonists, we already know that they have to have a want. So, a want. So, on a sheet of paper, you should write down the phone, the following. So, protagonist. So, the protagonist want or goal. I'm just going to say protagonist goal. And then the protagonist arc. So, again, if we're using Spider-Man, right? Spider-Man's goal is to always save others. His arc for a particular story could be anything like Spider-Man goes from, let's just say, he decided that he didn't want to help the Kingpin, a villain. So why would Spider-Man not want to help Kingpin? Because Kingpin is evil, and maybe Spider-Man feels like he deserves it. So maybe Spider-Man is judgmental. And then his arc will be essentially becoming the opposite of judgmental. So since we're using Kingpin as our antagonist, you would then want to write the antagonist arc, Kingpin. Unlike Spider-Man, who's going to have a change, which is the lesson that he's learning, Kingpin also has a lesson that he could learn, but ultimately most likely will fail at. So Kingpin has the opportunity to go from being evil to good. So our antagonist goal in this particular story may be Kingpin wants to rule the new clubs. And now we have our theme or our premise, which for Spider-Man is always easy. It's with great power comes great responsibility. And that reflects with Spider-Man. So now that we know the theme and premise is with great power comes great responsibility, this is a lesson that Spider-Man has already learned, that is still going to be our B story that drives the main story. And because we also know that Spider-Man's character goal is he's always going to save others, which is in direct opposition to Kingpin's goal of wanting to rule the clubs in New York. And through that, we see a problem when Spider-Man has to save the Kingpin. Creates a great story. So, in conclusion, always make sure that your protagonist, even if it's an evil character, bad character, um, a team of characters, you need to have problems, wants, and needs. All right. And that is essentially chapter one, everybody. Thank you for joining. I hope that wasn't too long. Um, I wanted to keep it kind of short, which is why we're only going to cover certain parts of what essentially is chapter one. If this video was helpful to you, please hit the bell to be notified of new videos. Give me a like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. A lot of this information you can find at savethecat.com. It's the ideology that was created by Blake Snyder. And there's several books. If you're trying to write a novel, there's Save the Cat Writes a Novel. If you're trying to write, I believe it's a TV script, they got Save the Cat Writes a television sitcom. And then there's the original book, Save the Cat, which helps you write screenplays for movies. And the ideology is all about story structure. But before we tackle story structure, we need our characters. And as far as being comic book writers, so I will have links to those particular books for anybody that's interested. in my bio. Wait, this is YouTube, not my bio. In my description, and that will wrap it up. I hope you guys enjoy. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. Please, please, please consider joining the Patreon where you can see, ooh, lights are going out, where you can see me put this into action with my new comic book series that I'm going to be starting up specifically to help with this the book that I'm writing. This is Angel Protocols. So until next time, I'll see you guys later. Keep writing and always remember, be terrific.